methods. So
Yeah.
those people who love the STAR method out there, I'm not saying it's bad.
Mhm.
But I will say that, so there's two pillars to interviewing, right? There is content and then there's delivery.
Mhm.
So if you don't have one of them, you're not going to do well in an interview. So the content piece, right? Is your example big enough? Is the content big enough? If you're giving a small scope example where you're not, I mean, you could be doing something very transactional, something that's day-to-day responsibility, then it doesn't matter how good of a communicator or how good of a delivery you give that, you're not going to get the job. Your examples have to be big enough. They have to be at that level. Otherwise, you're not going to get the job because you're not giving them a reason to hire you because your problems aren't big enough, right?
Yeah, so it's more like there needs to be some substance beyond just doing simple day-to-day tasks. Like,
Right, exactly. So how are you making an impact? What are the big problems you solve? Have you influenced an executive with data to give you buy-in to run a project that's going to create continuous improvement processes, right? Like that is the content. And if you don't have that, especially when you're interviewing for a higher level role, like that's another thing is the scope increases with every role. But if you're interviewing for like a senior manager role and you're giving me, really small scoped examples, I'm not going to hire you because the content's not there. It's not to the
right.
point of what it needs to be, right? So that's the one pillar. The second pillar is delivery. So delivery is a lot of things, right? It's good lighting. It's being well groomed. It's having a good background, right? It's being buttoned up, and I call those unconscious positive biases, right? So naturally, people want to gravitate to people that look organized, that seem like they have it, that seem like they're well put together. It's natural. It's a very human psychology tendency that we all have, right? But mostly what delivery is your ability to communicate and articulate in the right way. So what I mean by that is I have what's called my vague to verbose range. So anybody I coach, anybody I interview, anybody I talk to, they have that range. They fall within that range somewhere, right? So that's the second one, but this one's huge. You can have all kinds of great things, right, that you've done and content that you've done. But if you get beyond that in the communication way that you can't talk about it, then you're going to lose the interview again because you can't articulate it in the right way of that great content that you've done in your life, in your career, right? So with communication, you have to be able to articulate it in a specific way. And if you're vague, right? So the vague person never gets the job. They just don't, because they don't give enough detail. They're too high level. It leaves too many questions, and ultimately they don't sell themselves well enough. Whenever I'm coaching somebody who's vague, believe it or not, I actually like working with people who are very vague because they're a blank canvas, right? So I can walk through them. Hey, this is a prototype of what this sounds like. Is this something that you've done before, right? And usually they're like, oh yeah, I've done that. And I can draw and extract that information out of them, and we can build out a big enough example that they already had in their head. They just didn't know how to communicate it in the right way, right? And then there's your verbose person, right? So the verbose person, they actually get the job every once in a while if they can tell a compelling and engaging story, but they tend to go down the rabbit hole or digress too much, and they don't get the job. The goal is you want to be somewhere right here, leaning towards verbose. But that's the two pillars. You want to have both of those. You're going to have your good content, good delivery, and ultimately be able to deliver a really good example crisply and refined, right?
Yeah.
So